There are moments in warfare where everything depends on a few seconds, and those seconds are starting to disappear. Just 70 years ago, China's military was barely mechanized. Today, it's building weapons that move faster than sound, think faster than humans, and strike before detection systems react. So the real question isn't how powerful these systems are, it's what remains possible when the world can no longer respond in time. This shift does not begin with a single breakthrough. It emerges through a series of small changes in speed and coordination. Each system becomes slightly faster, slightly more connected, slightly less dependent on delay. On their own, these changes seem manageable, but once they begin to overlap, they start to change how the entire system behaves under pressure. Because once those seconds are gone, it doesn't slow down. It keeps moving, just without giving anyone time to understand what's happening. And once that starts, everything changes. Distance detection control. Not because they disappear, but because they stop working the way they used to. At first, the system still appears stable. Detection still works. Commands are still issued, responses still happen, but each step begins to lag slightly behind real events. That delay is small, almost invisible, but it compounds. And once it compounds, it begins to affect outcomes rather than just timing. For decades, military advantage followed predictable patterns: stronger weapons, better detection, faster response. Each advancement was countered by another system. Missiles could be intercepted, aircraft could be tracked, attacks could be anticipated, which meant warfare still had structure: time to react, time to respond. That structure depends on sequence. Detection comes first, decision follows, response completes the chain. But that structure depends on one assumption: that threats can be detected before they arrive. Now that assumption is starting to break. Not because of one weapon, but because multiple systems are removing those limits at the same time. When multiple limits disappear together, the system no longer moves in a clean sequence. Detection, decision, and response begin to overlap. And once they overlap, timing becomes inconsistent. That inconsistency is where control begins to weaken. The threat isn't just powerful, it behaves unpredictably. But if a threat can't be predicted, you won't see it coming. Prediction used to create preparation. Preparation created positioning. Positioning made response possible. When prediction fails, that entire chain collapses, leaving only reaction. Reaction without preparation loses its timing, is always late. These systems can coordinate with drones, analyze battlefield data, and make decisions instantly, faster than a human pilot ever could, which changes how air combat works. Because control no longer depends on how fast a human can react. Autonomous systems do not wait for confirmation. They process information continuously and act within the same flow of data they receive. There is no pause for interpretation, no delay for verification. Once those pauses disappear, events begin to accelerate beyond human control. A signal appears on a display. It is still being processed when the system has already classified it, prioritized it, and committed to a response. Before a human can interpret what is happening, the sequence has already advanced, and by the time the situation is understood, the decision is no longer ahead of the event. It is already behind it. In combat, humans are no longer fast enough to keep up, but if a threat can't be predicted, you only identify it once it's already too late. At that point, identification no longer creates an opportunity to act. It confirms that the moment for action has already passed, and without that moment, control begins to weaken further. And that shift doesn't stop at decision-making. Energy delivered at the speed of light, and adjustable in the moment it's used. Force can be applied instantly before anything signals it's happening. There is no buildup, no visible transition, no trajectory to follow. The effect appears at the same moment it is activated, but if impact is instantaneous, distance no longer buys you time. Hypersonic glide vehicles don't follow predictable paths. They maneuver at extreme speed, changing direction mid-flight while staying within the atmosphere. Tracking becomes uncertain. Interception becomes unreliable. At those speeds, reaction time shrinks to minutes, sometimes seconds. The threat can be seen, but not stopped in time. And if response time disappears, there's no time left to react. A detection system registers the object. A solution begins to form. An interception point is projected, but before it stabilizes, the path has already shifted. The projection collapses. The system recalculates. Yet every adjustment arrives too late, each correction slightly behind, until alignment is no longer possible. At extreme speeds, the limitation is no longer detection itself. Sensors still register the threat, but the information arrives too late. To be useful, systems begin reacting to positions that have already changed, and accuracy begins to degrade. Some systems don't focus on direct destruction. They target infrastructure, power grids, communication networks, control systems, using materials that disrupt electrical flow across large areas. Instead of destroying targets, they disable the systems that make response possible. In testing scenarios, entire sections of infrastructure can go dark in seconds. No communication, no coordination, no clear signal of what just happened. Everything shuts down before anyone understands why. And by the time it's noticed, there's nothing left to respond with, which changes how conflict begins. Because now, the first impact isn't physical, it's systemic. And once those systems go down, response doesn't fail. It never begins. Defenses never get the chance to engage. And once response never begins, nothing is there to stop what follows. One system stops responding, then another. A signal drops, then disappears. Completely, links break one after another, until what was connected becomes isolated, and what was coordinated becomes silent, with no clear point where the shift occurred. What makes this especially disruptive is the absence of a clear starting point. There is no visible moment where conflict begins. Systems simply stop functioning, and without communication, even advanced defenses lose coordination. Long-range missiles and bombers can strike targets without entering defended airspace, which removes exposure entirely, because the platform delivering the strike never becomes a target. At the same time, range continues to expand, allowing targets to be reached across continents, from positions that remain unseen and outside traditional tracking zones, which changes what distance actually means. It doesn't create delay, and it doesn't reduce risk. It simply extends reach without increasing vulnerability. Distance no longer shields anything, and when nowhere is safe, there's nothing left to rely on. Distance once created a buffer between action and consequence. That buffer no longer functions. The effect arrives before distance can influence the outcome. Detection-reaction time distance. These weren't advantages. They were what made defense possible in the first place, because every system depended on one condition, time to respond. But now that condition is breaking, not gradually, not in isolation. At the same time, signals arrive, too late. Responses fall behind. Distance offers no protection. Defense isn't being challenged, it's being bypassed. When systems can't detect, can't respond, and can't create distance, they stop functioning altogether. And when that happens, control shifts, not to the strongest system, but to the one that acts first. Advantage now belongs to whoever moves first. And if acting first becomes everything, balance doesn't hold anymore. When timing becomes the dominant factor, power becomes secondary. The system favors the side that initiates first, because the opposing side no longer has enough time to respond effectively. That balance was never about who was stronger. It was about time. Time to verify, to communicate, to prevent escalation. But when that time starts to disappear, the system changes, not gradually, but structurally, because stability only works if both sides can respond. And once that ability begins to erode, deterrence weakens, not all at once, but enough to create uncertainty. And uncertainty changes how decisions are made, because decisions are no longer made with full information, but under pressure, with less time, less clarity, and higher stakes, which increases the risk that mistakes escalate instead of being corrected. And once miscalculation enters the process, control becomes fragile, not because power increased, but because response became unreliable. Stability now depends on who still has time left to react. And as that time continues to shrink, events begin to overlap. Detection happens while impact is already unfolding. Decisions are made while consequences are already forming. The sequence compresses into a single moment where cause and effect are no longer separated. And once everything overlaps, there's no window left, only impact. Control does not disappear suddenly. It stops shaping what follows, and everything keeps moving without waiting.